To this looming nuclear threat from Iran from the Israeli perspective. It renewed tensions between the Obama administration and Israel this week. Earlier, I spoke with the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, about where things stand and whether he is trying to influence the outcome of our presidential campaign. Prime Minister, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Thank you. Good to be with you, David.
I want to talk specifically, before we get to the questions of what's happening more broadly in the Middle East and the turmoil there this week, about the threat from Iran. You spoke about that this week and this question of whether Israel has to take matters into its own hands, and you launched pretty pointed criticism at the United States. I want to play a portion of what you said.
The world tells Israel, wait, there's still time. And I say, wait for what? Wait until when? Those in the international community who refuse to put red lines before Iran don't have a moral right to place a red light before Israel.
Prime Minister, I want to understand very clearly what your views are. Is it your view that the Obama administration is either unwilling or unable to stop Iran from becoming a nuclear power?
Now, first of all, President Obama and the U.S. administration have repeatedly said that Israel has the right to act by itself against any threat to defend itself. And I think that that remains our position. And for me, the issue is, as the Prime Minister of a country that is threatened with annihilation by a regime that is racing, a brutal regime in Tehran that is racing to develop nuclear bombs for that end. Obviously, we cannot delegate the job of stopping Iran, if all else fails, to someone else. That was the main point that I was saying there, was directed at the general international community. A lot of leaders call me, tell me, don't do it, it's not necessary. You know, the danger of acting is much greater than not acting, and I always say the danger of not acting in time is much greater. Because Iran with nuclear weapons would mean that the kind of fanaticism that you see storming your embassies would have a nuclear weapon. Don't let these fanatics have nuclear weapons.
But Prime Minister, let's be clear. You were upset with this administration. The Secretary of State Hillary Clinton had said in an interview that there were no deadlines by this administration in terms of what Iran should or shouldn't do by a date certain. That's what led to those remarks. And so my question still stands. Is it your view that this administration is either unwilling or unable to stop Iran from developing a nuclear weapon?
No. President Obama has said that he is determined to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons. I appreciate that and I respect that. I think implicit in that is that if you're determined to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons, it means you'll act before they get nuclear weapons. I just think that it's important to communicate to Iran that there's a line that they won't cross. I think a red line in this case works to reduce the chances of the need for military action, because once the Iranians understand that there's a line that they can't cross, they're not likely to cross it. You know, when President Kennedy set a red line in the Cuban Missile Crisis, he was criticized, but it turned out it didn't bring war. It actually pushed war back and probably purchased decades of peace with the Soviet Union. Conversely, when there was no American red line set before the Gulf War, Saddam Hussein invaded Kuwait, and maybe that war could have been avoided. And I can tell you, David, that Iran has been placed with some clear red lines on a few matters, and they've avoided crossing them. So I think that as they get closer and closer and closer to the achievement of weapons-grade material, they're very close. They're 6 months away from being about 90% of having the enriched uranium for an atom bomb. I think that you have to place that red line before them now, before it's too late. That was the point that I was making.
As a Prime Minister of Israel, has Iran crossed your red line?
Well, the way I would say it, David, is they're in the red zone. You know, they're in the last 20 yards, and you can't let them cross that goal line. You can't let them score a touchdown, because that would have unbelievable consequences, grievous consequences for the peace and security of us all, of the world, really.
That seems to be a newer development from your way of thinking, that they are now in a red zone. And to use the sports metaphor, you won't let them cross the goal line. Is Israel closer to taking action into its own hands?
We always reserve the right to act, but I think that if we are able to coordinate together a common position, we increase the chances that neither one of us will have to act. Iran is very cognizant of the fact of its degrees of freedom, and as the IAEA report says, not only have they not stopped, they actually rushed forward. They're rushing forward with their enrichment program, and I think it's very important to make it clear to them that they can't just proceed with impunity.
Your criticism, your calling on President Obama to set this red line comes in the middle of a heated presidential campaign. You understand the American political system very well. You're very sophisticated in that regard. In your view, would Governor Mitt Romney, as President Romney, make Israel safer? Would he take a harder line against Iran than President Obama, in your judgment?
God, I'm not going to be drawn into the American election. And what's guiding my statements is not the American political calendar, but the Iranian nuclear calendar. They're just, if they stopped spinning the centrifuges and took time out for the American elections, I wouldn't have to talk, and I wouldn't have to raise this issue. But as the Prime Minister of Israel, knowing that this country committed to our destruction is getting closer to the goal of having weapons of mass destruction, then I speak out. And it's really not a partisan political issue. And I think it's important for anyone who's the President of the United States to be in that position of preventing Iran from having this nuclear weapons and nuclear weapons capability. And I'm talking to the President. I just talked to him the other day. We're in close consultations and trying to prevent it. It's really not a partisan issue. It's a policy issue, not a political issue.
Well, but it may not be a partisan issue. You've known Mitt Romney a long time. The reality is, tell me if you disagree, that Governor Romney, just an interview this week, said that his position is very much the same as President Obama. They are both committed to preventing Iran from acquiring a nuclear weapon. Not just as an impartial observer, as the Prime Minister of Israel. Do you agree with that, that both the President and his challenger have the same view with regard to preventing Iran from going nuclear?
I have no doubt that they're equally committed to preventing that. It's a vital American interest. It's an existential interest on my case. So this isn't the issue. We're united on this across the board.
Why can't Iran be contained just as the Soviet Union was? There are those in your country and in the United States who believe that a containment strategy would actually work.
I think Iran is very different. They put their zealotry above their survival. They have suicide bombers all over the place. I wouldn't rely on their rationality. Since the advent of nuclear weapons, you've had countries that had access to nuclear weapons who always made a careful calculation of cost and benefit. But Iran is guided by a leadership with an unbelievable fanaticism. It's the same fanaticism that you see storming your embassies today. You want these fanatics to have nuclear weapons? I mean, I heard some people suggest, David, I actually read this in the American press. They said, well, if you take action, that's a lot worse than having Iran with nuclear weapons. Some have even said that Iran with nuclear weapons would stabilize the Middle East. Stabilize the Middle East. I think the people who say this have set a new standard for human stupidity. We have to stop them. Don't rely on containment. That is not the American policy. It would be wrong. It would be a grave, grave mistake. Don't let these fanatics have nuclear weapons. It's terrible for Israel. It's terrible for America. It's terrible for the world.
Prime Minister, one more question on the American election. You have been accused this week by pundits in this country of trying to interfere in this presidential election, siding with Governor Mitt Romney. Now, Governor Romney, for a year, and he said it in his convention speech, has said, quote, President Obama has thrown allies like Israel under the bus. Do you agree or disagree with Governor Romney's charge? It's a serious charge.
Well, you're trying to get me into the American election, and I'm not going to do that. The relationship between Israel and the United States is a bond it's just a very powerful bond. It was, it is, and will be. It will continue to be. And I can tell you, there's no leader in the world who's more appreciative than me of the strength of this alliance. It's very strong. There's no one in Israel who appreciates more than me the importance of American support for Israel. It's not a partisan issue. In fact, we cherish the bipartisan support of Democrats and Republicans alike. This is critical for us.
But Prime Minister, with respect, if I may just interrupt you.
It's critical that we take
I think this is a very important point because you say you don't want to interfere in the election. There are tens of millions of Americans who are watching that speech, who hear that rhetoric, who hear that charge, who may not understand the complexities of this issue. You are the leader of the Jewish people. You say this is not a partisan issue. You get billions of dollars from direct foreign investment from this country, hundreds of millions of dollars from Americans, Jews and Christians alike from this country. It seems to me for you to remain silent on whether this administration has thrown Israel under the bus is tantamount to agreeing with the sentiment. So where do you come down on that specific charge against President Obama?
No, there you go again, David. You're trying to draw me into something that is simply not the case, and it's not my position. My position is that we have strong cooperation. We'll continue to cooperate. We're the best of allies, and Israel is the one reliable ally of the United States.
So President Obama has not thrown Israel under the bus
until yesterday. So there's no bus, and we're not going to get into that discussion except to say one thing: we have a strong alliance, and we're going to continue to have a strong alliance. I think the important question is where does the only bus that is really important is the Iranian nuclear bus. That's the one that we have to derail, and that's my interest. That's my only interest.
Final question on the broader Middle East and what we're seeing this week. This anti-American and indeed anti-Israeli rage throughout the Middle East, attacking our embassy, killing a United States ambassador, as you well know. What has been unleashed, and what can the United States and its allies specifically do to contain it?
Well, look, I think people focus on the spark of reprehensible and irresponsible film is a spark, but it's not. It doesn't explain anything. I mean, it doesn't explain 9/11. It doesn't explain the decades of animosity and the grievances that go back centuries. In fact, there's a tinderbox of hatred here from a virulent strain of Islam that takes moderate Muslims and Arabs and attacks them first, but seeks to deprive all of us of the basic values that we have. They're against human rights, they're against the rights of women, they're against freedom of religion, they're against freedom of speech and freedom of expression. They're against all the things that we value. They're against tolerance, they're against pluralism, and they're against freedom. And they view not your policies, but you, the very existence of the United States and its values, and by extension Israel, they view that as an intolerable crime. And we have to understand that. We have to deal with it, and we have to be in close support, because in this vast expanse of land, you can understand why they're so antagonistic to us. Because for them, we are you and you are us. And at least on this point, they're right.
Finally, Prime Minister, did you feel snubbed not getting a face-to-face meeting with President Obama in New York during the upcoming UN meetings? Would you like to have that face-to-face encounter? Would it be helpful to your relationship at this point?
You know, I'm always pleased and happy to have a conversation with President Obama. I think he's met me more than any other leader in the world, and I appreciate that. We've had our discussions. Our schedules on this visit didn't work out. I come to New York, he leaves New York. But we continue in close consultations. We have urgent business, Israel and America, to prevent Iran from getting nuclear weapons. I think it's important to delineate a red line for Iran, so we're not faced with the conundrum of what to do if we don't place a red line and they just proceed to the bomb.
Prime Minister, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you to all of you.